How do you recover from working in a toxic work environment? This is actually one of my subscribers' video suggestions, and I do read all of the comments. So please put down what other video ideas you want to see, because I'd love to make content based on what you want to see. But first of all, congratulations on escaping your toxic work environment. You could have done this by getting a new job altogether. Maybe you got a new boss, or maybe your toxic teammate ended up getting fired. But is it even possible to recover and bounce back after leaving a toxic work environment? And is it possible to enjoy working again? The answer is yes, and all you have to do is follow the tips in this video, because I'm going to tell you the bad habits that you need to break after leaving a toxic work environment and what it takes for you to actually bounce back and recover. And then I'm going to tell you how to prevent a toxic work environment from being created again. So first, let's talk about the bad habits that you need to break after you start a new job or when you are recovering from a toxic work environment. And to do that, let's walk through the different reasons why you may have had a toxic work environment before and what bad habits that would lead you to build up by working in that space. So first, if you had an overbearing boss who used to micromanage you all the time, you probably over-communicate too much now, and that's a bad habit because you're going to irritate your new boss and your new teammates because you constantly have to tell them what you're doing. Or maybe you had a toxic teammate, and that meant that you basically did all your work by yourself and you never got to ask for help and you had to do everything on your own. Or maybe you used to work in an overly competitive work culture. I know companies like Netflix, for example, fire the bottom 25% of performers every single year, which means in their work culture, you're not encouraged to help other people. Because if you help your teammate and your teammate ends up looking better than you, then you'll get fired. So it's actually more beneficial for you to not share anything and to do everything on your own and to try to take as much credit and show off and brag as much as possible. So if you're trying to recover from that type of toxic work environment where it's overly competitive, that means that you're not used to helping others and you act really selfishly around the office. Or maybe your toxic work environment was because you didn't feel psychologically safe in order to be yourself and to share ideas. So one of your bad habits is that you don't really talk a lot in meetings and you don't share your ideas. And another bad habit that you want to break is that you used to let people push you around and push you over, and you would always say yes to everything because you were too scared to say no and stand up for yourself. Or maybe you had a boss that was incompetent and wasn't able to help you from the technical perspective in training you and teaching you things on the job, and you weren't able to ask them for help or how to figure things out. So that means your bad habit is you used to take a lot of responsibility on your own and you used to do everything by yourself, and you wouldn't let things fail so people wouldn't notice any problems. Do any of these bad habits sound like things that you've potentially built up and trained yourself after working in a toxic work environment? So the most important thing is that you're able to recognize what bad habits you have and why you have them, because now we can talk about how to actually bounce back and to handle these bad habits from recovering from a bad work environment. Unfortunately, you are going to have a little bit of PTSD in the beginning, so take your time and go slowly. Every single week, you should try to step a little bit more outside of your comfort zone, trying to break your bad habits. Unfortunately, you're like one of those previously abused and sad puppies at the animal shelter, but once you get adopted by a loving family, everything's gonna be okay. So here are some examples of ways to bounce back and break those bad habits. Like, for example, if you used to have a boss who micromanaged you, maybe you should try sending out an email to just your immediate team without asking your boss to review it first and see what they say. If you used to have a toxic teammate, why don't you ask somebody on your team to teach you how to do something and see if they call you stupid? If you used to work at a company that was overly competitive, why don't you ask one of your teammates if they need help with one of their projects and see if they just try to protect it and not want to talk to you about it? If you didn't feel psychologically safe at your last team or company, when you're talking with your manager one-on-one, why don't you share one of your ideas and see if they'll listen to you? If your previous boss was incompetent, why don't you ask your new boss if they can help you do something, or you have a question related to something, and see what they can teach you? Okay, now let's talk about how to prevent a toxic work environment from happening, because you don't want to be the catalyst or the main common denominator as to why everything feels toxic and you have a bad work environment. Remember, you can't control others and tell them what to do, but you can control your own reactions to things, which could actually help prevent a lot of these toxic work environments from being created. My first tip is don't take things personally at work. Generally, people have really good intentions, and unless you're like a surgeon or a doctor, your job is really not that important. You're not saving babies at your job. So that means if you share an idea and it doesn't get implemented or people don't use it right away, don't get mad and don't be offended. It doesn't mean your idea was bad, it just means that it wasn't right at this appropriate time. Or if your teammate sends you a message on Slack, make sure you read it with a positive tone and don't assume negative intention.
At the bar, whatever, I don't care. Whatever, I don't care? his problem? Do you even want to hang out?
Do you even want to hang out? Oh, that's considerate.
Next, don't brag about your accomplishments. Be humble and let your work speak for itself, at least at the beginning when you first join your company. And most importantly, if they don't use your idea and it ends up being the right choice, don't rub it in their face and tell them, I told you so. This is the exact type of behavior that can spur and create a toxic work environment without even knowing it. Next, don't get involved or encourage office gossip. I know it can be really tempting, it can be really entertaining sometimes, but just listen in and don't contribute. This is like adding fuel to the fire, and if people realize that it's fun and this is something that should be normalized, that can create a toxic work culture. This next tip is something that my therapist used to tell me, but has actually been very helpful at the office, which is always talk about how you feel and what you are in control of. Do not try to tell other people what they should be doing. If you start to tell your teammate what they could be doing better, what they're doing wrong, they're obviously going to get defensive, and then they're going to start to attack you personally or professionally, and then it's going to create this never-ending vicious cycle of toxicity. My next tip is, at least at the beginning, initially, try to give your manager the benefit of the doubt and trust that your manager will handle things for you if you raise an issue. Don't try to do everything yourself, and do your best to proactively identify risks and flag them to your manager ahead of time so that some of these things can be prevented. And if your manager isn't necessarily able to help right away or isn't able to solve the whole problem initially, don't assume that they're incompetent. Give them the benefit of the doubt at least one more time. Now, here's a pro tip from me as a recruiter of over 10 years. What I want to tell you is when you're applying and interviewing at companies, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And this is why people walk into places that they feel are toxic work environments and get surprised. So usually, if there's a company that pays significantly more than everyone else in an industry, there's a reason for it. Usually the companies that pay the most typically have the worst work cultures and environments. Think about it, right? Why else would they be paying so much more than every other company in the same space? That's because they're going to work you hard and they're going to expect you to be okay working long hours and not complaining because they pay you so much money. So if you want to avoid walking into places that have a toxic work environment, I would be very cautious about the places that make it seem too good to be true when they're trying to convince you to come and work there. But I'd love to hear from you guys. Put down in the comments, what was your last toxic work environment like and what did you do to escape and get out? Thank you all for watching, and don't be afraid to shake things up if you're in a really bad work environment right now.